binding an edge. You're going to want to cut a piece of bias binding. I'll have that for you in the sewing room. And you want to cut it so that it is the same length as your sample. Now, bias tape that's ready-made and available in Sewing Notions departments has folds pressed into it. So you want to take the length of your bias tape and open out one of those folds. We can leave the other one folded, it's fine. If you can manage to not press it, you'll be happier because you can see the crease. Okay, now you might need to put in some pins. You want to line it up so that your cut edges are even. So put it right along. This would be on the right side of your fabric if you're using a print. So open out the bias tape and place it so that the crease is next to the right side of your sample piece. Mine's a tiny bit short, but that's okay. All right, using a regular stitch length, we're going to go to the machine and we're going to sew in that crease, in that fold. So your instructions say it's 1/4 inch. When I'm looking at this, it's really closer to 1/2 inch, or excuse me, 3/8 inch, and it really is dependent on the bias tape product itself. You do want to backstitch a bit at the end when you start. And if you used pins, simply remove them as you get to them and sew in that crease, attaching the bias tape to a single layer of your sample. And backstitch. Okay, take it off the machine. Trim my threads over here. I have a little spare thread here. Now, if you were doing an application where you didn't want the bias tape to show, you could trim that seam allowance down, and then you could press the whole business underneath. However, what I'm asking you to do is actually binding an edge so that we see the binding. It becomes a decorative effect. So now you can go to the iron and you can press your binding around your seam allowance, and the back side of the binding should extend beyond the front side. Okay, I'm going to hold it like that so you can see how the back side, whoop, there you go. The back side is going farther beyond that seam. Now I need to do what we call stitch in the ditch. Okay, I'm going to sew right where my green fabric meets my black binding. Obviously, if I had matching thread, either black or green, this would be more successful. I do want to backstitch just slightly at the beginning and the end. Now, since I did not have an iron, I'm going to be sort of putting this in place as I go. Now I can feel that I have gotten some of my stitching on the binding, which is not perfect. I may do this one again for you. Let's see. Well, let's see here. That's pretty good. If I were using black thread, it would be beautiful. If I were using light green thread, it would not be so beautiful because you can see that my stitching got on the edge of the binding there. Right here, it's perfect, where the stitching is actually in the ditch. Okay, so you're going to do your best. So on my grading scale of 1 through 5, 5 being the highest score, this would be a 4. All right, so if I were making a garment and I needed it to be perfect, I would do that again. That's binding an edge.